When Catherine the Great came to power, she brought with her a new era of sophistication and cultural appreciation for Russia. She took particular interest in the arts and sciences, becoming a patron to some of the brightest minds of her day, and history remembers her for her insatiable curiosity, collecting everything from rare books to natural wonders. But there was one thing she coveted more than anything: an enigmatic room crafted from pure amber. Welcome to this house. Today, we are exploring the enigma of the Amber Room, the Prussian dream. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode. As the sun sets in the east, it bathes the opulent palaces of St. Petersburg in hues of burnt umber and molten gold. It's here that Catherine the Great resides, her vast empire stretching before her like a frozen sea under a winter moon. Her gaze, however, is focused on something much smaller, much more personal. A single panel of amber held delicately in her gloved hand. Its surface is smooth and warm, a fossilized tree resin from some prehistoric pine forest. It catches the candlelight and shimmers like a captured sunset. This humble fragment is all that remains of the legendary Amber Room, a relic lost to the ravages of war and time. Catherine traces the delicate veining on its surface, dreaming of a time when its golden glow might once again grace her halls. Now, the story of the Amber Room is one that has captivated imaginations for centuries, spoken of only in hushed tones as a legendary relic of bygone days. No one knows exactly where or how it disappeared, but the tale of its creation is well known. It began in the early 18th century when the German King Frederick I commissioned the decoration of a small room with amber panels. Now, amber, you see, is more than just a pretty stone. It is an ancient fossil, a petrified resin from trees that lived millions of years ago, and those who study its composition claim that it holds a special kind of energy, a power that can heal and soothe the mind and body. So it was that the king hoped to create a sanctuary within his palace, a place where he and his guests could escape the cares of the world and bask in the warm glow of amber light. But as the decades passed, the room changed hands, moving from one ruler to the next, until it landed in the possession of Catherine the Great. Now, Catherine had always been fond of luxury and excess, but something about the Amber Room intrigued her. Perhaps it was the mysterious energy that the scholars spoke of, or maybe it was just the sheer beauty of the panels. Whatever the reason, she decided to make it her own. With the help of her favorite architect, she moved the panels from their dusty storage room to her own private chambers, where she spent countless hours arranging and rearranging them until she was satisfied with the effect. The room was small, no bigger than a closet, but Catherine made the most of it, filling it with plush furnishings and exotic plants to create a true oasis of tranquility. There, surrounded by the soft glow of amber light, she could relax and enjoy the fruits of her vast empire. For a time, the Amber Room remained Catherine's secret pleasure, known only to her closest friends and family. But as the years passed, word of its existence began to leak out, and soon everyone in the palace was talking about it. Some said the room was cursed, that its very presence drained the life out of those who entered it. Others claimed that it was a source of great power, that its energy could be harnessed to do incredible things. Catherine, however, dismissed these rumors as nonsense. She continued to spend her evenings in the room, reading, writing, and receiving guests, all while bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. But then one day, the unthinkable happened. A fire broke out in the palace, quickly spreading through the dry timber and thatch roofs. Catherine watched in horror as the flames crept closer and closer to her precious Amber Room. Despite the efforts of the firefighters, the blaze spread rapidly, soon engulfing the entire building. Catherine fled for her life, along with her family and servants, as the flames devoured everything in their path. When they returned, the palace was a smoldering ruin. Catherine stood among the rubble, her heart breaking at the sight of her beautiful home destroyed around her. But then she noticed something in the midst of the wreckage, a single panel of amber, still standing upright and glowing softly in the dim light. With trembling hands, she reached out and touched it, feeling the familiar warmth of the stone beneath her fingertips. It was just one small piece of what had once been a magnificent room, but to Catherine, it was a treasure beyond price. She carefully removed any debris that had fallen on it, revealing more and more of the intricate carvings that decorated its surface. As she gazed at the panel, she remembered all the joy and happiness that the Amber Room had brought her over the years. It had been a place of peace and tranquility in an otherwise chaotic world. and now it was gone, reduced to ashes and dust. Suddenly, Catherine felt a surge of determination. She would not let all that beauty be destroyed. She would find a way to rebuild the Ember Room, piece by piece, until it shone once again in all its glory. First, though, she needed to gather the resources that would make her dream a reality. Over the next few years, Catherine assembled a team of the finest artisans and scholars, men who shared her passion for the arts and sciences. Together, they traveled all over Europe, searching for lost fragments of the Ember Room, combing through dusty attics and forgotten storerooms in hopes of finding another piece of the elusive puzzle. They scoured auction houses and private collections, offering exorbitant sums of money for even the smallest shard of amber. Their search was long and frustrating, but slowly, surely, they began to uncover more and more of the missing panels. Finally, after years of searching, they had gathered enough fragments to begin the arduous task of reconstruction. Under Catherine's close supervision, the team carefully pieced together the panels, using X-ray technology to identify which fragments fit where. They worked tirelessly, day and night, and progress was slow. But as the months passed, the Ember Room began to take shape once again, and when it was finally complete, it was even more magnificent than before. Catherine stood back to admire her handiwork, her heart swelling with pride and accomplishment. The room was a triumph, a testament to the power of human creativity and the indomitable spirit of one woman's dream. It was more than just a room. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, beauty and wonder can endure. But Catherine's joy was short-lived, for as the years passed, the Soviet Union grew weaker and weaker, torn apart by internal strife and external pressures. Soon, the hammer and sickle would fall, and the Red Army would march into Berlin. Among the countless treasures looted during the war, the Ember Room disappeared, vanishing without a trace. Some say it was melted down for its gold content, while others believe it is still hidden away in a secret location waiting to be rediscovered. But despite its disappearance, the legend of the Ember Room lives on. For centuries, it has captured the imaginations of artists, writers, and filmmakers, inspiring countless works of art and literature. Today, visitors to Berlin can explore the empty room, where the Ember Room once stood, imagining the golden glow that must have filled the space. Or they can visit the nearby DDR museum to see a replica of one of the room-S panels. It is a faint echo of the original, but it serves as a powerful reminder of the beauty that once was. So what will become of the real Ember Room? Will it ever be found? Only time will tell. But in the meantime, we can marvel at the story of its creation and the legacy of Catherine the Great, the woman who dreamed of capturing the sun. The palace walls were bare, echoing with the hollow voices of an almost imperceptible past. Though the city itself bustled with activity, the Winter Palace still felt very much like a building site. Men hauled huge blocks of granite up the palace staircases, while masons outside patiently chipped and fitted countless stones together, slowly encasing the structure in a hard shell. Peter the Great, however, was already looking to the interior, to how this great palace might reflect the glory of Russia and himself. He wished to surpass Versailles, to show the absolute monarchs of Europe that he, too, could provide a home fit for a king. And so, he turned to the riches he had acquired over his many travels around the Baltic states, and the Prussian acquisition was the jewel in his crown, the soon-to-be famous Ember Room. Its crates sat patiently waiting for their moment in the steadily progressing palace, but the Tsar had yet to decide where exactly such a room should go. The somewhat awkward dimensions of the pieces made them impossible to install in their original form, and any alterations. 2. The design would irrevocably change the character of the artwork. The whole room, in fact, would need to be refitted and reassembled for its new location, and few individuals in Peter's court possessed the necessary experience. Of course, there were plenty of builders and craftsmen in the Imperial Russian court, but designing and executing such a unique project required a particular expertise in both amber and old Prussian design. So the Tsar reached out to Prussia, asking if someone from the court of Frederick WWII could come to St. Petersburg to advise him on the construction of the room. This unusual request wasn't a surprise to Frederick William I, ever since he offered the room as a diplomatic gift. He had expected something similar to happen. He therefore had someone primed for just such an occasion. Johann Gottfried Stark, a craftsman and designer specializing in gilding and the restoration of old Prussian artifacts. Stark had long been familiar with the Amber Room, and had even worked with the materials when the room was first being created. The Soldier King did not want to lose track of such an important part of his predecessor's legacy, and he knew no one better to oversee the resurrection of the Amber Room than Johann Gottfried Stark. With his knowledge and experience, Stark would be able to ensure the room would be assembled correctly and beautifully in its new home. The exact nature of the agreement between Frederick William I and Peter the Great is unknown, though the fact that Stark was granted access to the crates with instructions to examine the contents suggests that Prussia was either paid handsomely for this service or was receiving some other form of compensation for the loss of its national treasure. Either way, Stark arrived in St. Petersburg with strict orders to get to work and create a space fit for a Tsar. With careful precision, the craftsman began the slow process of opening the crates, unwrapping the precious amber panels, and examining the extent of the room. What he found was far better than he had hoped. Each piece was undamaged, their bright surface free of any cracks or significant scratches. The panels themselves looked almost brand new, untouched by the passage of time. And as he pieced together the fragments of a glorious Prussian drawing room, a slow smile spread across his face. The Tsar's chamber was ready to become the Amber Room. Work progressed quickly under Stark's direction, fueled by the promise of generous payment from the Tsar. The completed room was to be placed in the palace's Berlin room, a space that had been deliberately reserved for the Prussian masterpiece. The only problem was that the Berlin room was not quite ready. To make matters worse, Peter the Great was growing impatient. As a former member of the Prussian court, Stark understood the delicate balance between speed and quality, working as fast as he could without sacrificing the integrity of the room. After just 4 months, the painstaking reconstruction was complete. The room, slightly altered to fit its new space, sparkled in the candlelight, reflecting the glow of thousands of tiny mirrors embedded in the amber panels. Peter the Great entered the room, surrounded by an adoring court. His eyes swept across the gold and amber walls, taking in the sight of the Prussian masterpiece. The room was spectacular, a dazzling display of wealth and craftsmanship, far more impressive than anything else in the palace. And the Tsar loved it. Peter the Great immediately set about making the Amber Room a central feature of his court. Nobles and visiting dignitaries were brought to the room for private audiences, where the Tsar would regale them with tales of his travels and conquests. The room became a stage for the Tsar's elaborate lifestyle, reflecting his wealth and power. Over time, the Amber Room became more than just a beautiful room. It was a symbol of Peter the Great's transformation of Russia. Built during a time of incredible growth and change, it represented the country's emergence as a major European power. Visitors to the room were overwhelmed by its beauty. The play of light on the amber panels, the intricate carvings, the gilded mirrors, all combined to create an atmosphere of magic and wonder. It was as if the room itself were alive, pulsing with the energy of 1,000 candles. But the Amber Room's brilliance was not just a product of its design. It was also the result of the intense labor that went into creating and maintaining it. From the miners who first extracted the amber to the craftsmen who carved and polished it to the designers who planned the room and the builders who put it all together, countless hands had a role in creating this masterpiece. And it was this human element that made the Amber Room so special. In the end, the room became a victim of its own success. Its beauty was so breathtaking that it was impossible to keep it confined to just one room. Instead, the Tsar decided to break up the collection, sending panels to other rooms and buildings throughout St. Petersburg. Over the years, the Amber Room lost its coherence as a single unified space, but even in its fragmented state, it remained a testament to the genius of its creators. Today, visitors to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg can still marvel at the beauty of the Amber Room, even though much of it has been lost. The surviving panels are a reminder of the room's former glory, a faded memory of a masterpiece that once dazzled the world. The dramatic relocation of the Amber Room was not just a mere reshuffle of artworks. It was a pivotal moment in the history of Russian art and design. In essence, it marked the official death of the Prussian Amber Room and the birth of the Russian Chamber of the Sun. The very name itself reflects the new, brash confidence of the Russian Empire. Where the Germans had emphasized the color of the walls, the Russians celebrated the effect of the room itself. It was a shift in perspective that mirrored the personalities of the two monarchs involved in the transaction. The Soldier King saw the room as an expensive, dusty inconvenience. Peter the Great viewed it as the radiant heart of a future masterpiece. And what follows next is a tale of ambition, architectural audacity, and the daring gamble to move a priceless relic to a faraway land. Our story so far has focused on the exquisite craft and diplomatic machinations behind the Amber Room's creation and relocation. However, the room's history doesn't exist in a vacuum. It was born and flourished in the midst of two of Europe's greatest monarchs, Frederick William I of Prussia and Peter the Great of Russia. Their contrasting personalities and ambitions played a crucial role in the room's dramatic journey. Frederick William I, known as the Soldier King, was a man defined by discipline, order, and military efficiency. His focus on regiments and barracks led him to see the Amber Room as an impractical luxury. In contrast, Peter the Great, the Tsar of Russia, was an ardent supporter of the arts and sciences. He was fascinated by the potential of the Amber Room, recognizing its value as a symbol of Russian power and sophistication. The decision to dismantle and ship the room to St. Petersburg was a bold move, driven by Peter's desire to transform his new capital into a showcase of Western European culture. Both monarchs played their parts in shaping the Amber Room's destiny. Frederick William I's pragmatic approach nearly led to the room's demise, while Peter the Great's visionary leadership ensured its survival and eventual prominence. Understanding their motivations and methods helps us fully appreciate the events that led to the relocation of this priceless artifact. The year is 1920. Vladimir Lenin stands triumphantly before an enormous crowd in the newly appropriately grandiose Hall of Columns in Moscow. Behind him, the massive audience cheers enthusiastically. But behind the facade of enthusiasm, there is no sound louder than the creeping footsteps of a ghost. This ghost, ethereal and ancient, has followed the room since the days of Frederick I. Now it haunts the triumphant Bolsheviks and whispers endlessly of kings and emperors, of gold and amber, the spirit of the Amber Room. As we know, the Red Army has just successfully evacuated the Western Front. And today, a cornerstone of Russian culture has just been recovered, smuggled out of hostile Prussia, hidden in dozens of crates, transported on river boats up the Neva, and finally installed in the Kremlin. Here, in the very heart of the revolution, in the building that will soon serve as the seat of the Soviet government, the specter of the old regime is ostentatiously resurrected. On the walls are installed those 217 panels, that 8,000 square foot golden rectangle, that authentic, unparalleled wonder of the world. This is supposed to be a powerful message of cultural continuity, proof that Russia's revolutionary fervor has not snuffed out the flame of its own heritage. But can a mere room really carry such a symbolic burden? And what does the room itself say about the communist revolution that's installed it? The Amber Room is simultaneously an ancient relic and a recent antique, a perfect physical embodiment of Russia's fraught relationship with its own past. It reflects the country's painful efforts to reconcile tradition with radical change, all while embodying an endless cycle of loss, relocation, and restoration. The fact that it has survived it all is a true miracle. But how exactly did it arrive in this place, in this condition? To understand, let's rewind. It's September 1917, and the German Empire has just declared war on Russia. With Russia's involvement in World War I becoming increasingly inevitable, the Germans view the Amber Room as an important opportunity to harm Russia even before direct hostilities commence. They intend to send a message through the medium of amber, one of unprecedented destruction and irreversible loss. A single soldier is dispatched with a sledgehammer, charged with doing the maximum amount of damage to the room's panels before fleeing across the border. They swing. The soldier panics, realizing the gravity of his action. He fled in haste, but now the damage is done. The Amber Room is physically mutilated. Pieces are missing. Giant gaps are visible along the walls, but the shell of the room remains, and it is loaded onto trains bound for Germany. The Germans plan to use the room as a propaganda tool, displaying their handiwork and daring theft in Berlin. But soon, the tide of war turns. The Germans become increasingly desperate, and in early night, they order the panels shipped east to the safety of their ally, the collapsing Russian government in Enigma. But the move is too late. By November, the Bolsheviks have seized power. Within a year, the Russians are counterattacking. Soon, the Germans fear the Ember Room may fall into enemy hands. An elaborate series of logistical operations are initiated to move the room first to Levadia, then to Simferopol. The entire affair becomes an absurd sideshow of the war, with soldiers, diplomats, and even members of the Romanov family scrambling to save the panels from destruction or worse, appropriation by the increasingly powerful Bolsheviks. In July 1919, an uneasy truce is formed between the warring factions, and a joint committee is established to oversee the safe passage of the room back to Russia. The evacuation is a tense affair, and soon, without a shred of irony, the Amber Room finds itself caught in a battle between two superpowers of communism and monarchism. Finally, on August 14, 1920, the last panel is delivered to Moscow. The fate of the room is sealed. Now, amidst the chaos, let's step back to admire the handiwork of our soldiers. The Amber Room is indeed restored, but it is hardly whole. The original Prussian panels stand alongside newer, inferior replicas. Here and there, bizarre, foreign elements intrude upon the ensemble. There are signs of the room's turbulent journey, the chaotic retreat from Berlin, the hasty departure from Königsberg, the frustrated rebuilding in Lviv, the decisive evacuation from Ukraine. Can this jumble of pieces ever be reconstructed into something coherent? Is it even possible to imagine the room whole again? The current state of affairs is far from ideal, but the process of restoration has begun, and it will only get more thorough as the years pass. While some scholars believe the entire room should reflect its troubled past, a fragmented museum piece, others want to restore it to wholeness, a shining monument to the past. The reality is that each reconstruction is inevitably selective. The Amber Room continues to reflect whatever ideology is currently in power. Right now, it is a triumph of communist industry, an icon of Russia's greatest architects, and artisans painstakingly recreating a national treasure lost during the darkest days of World War I. However, it also retains a ghostly residue of the past, a reminder of a Russia that once prized luxury in excess, of the czars who ruled at Russia and the kings of Prussia who crafted this room. One thing is clear. The room's meaning is not intrinsic. It is made by its viewers and users. Right now, it is a celebration of the Russian Revolution, a monument to the achievements of a new government. But there will be other interpretations, other installations, other messages. The room's meaning shifts and changes, and so it will continue to do so until its panels are ground to dust. The Amber Room survives to fascinate because it is above all a human creation, a material reflection of the whims of men and women throughout history. It will be rebuilt, yes, but its ultimate form will be determined by an elusive, indefinable set of choices made by people long dead and those still standing before it. The ambiguity is both fascinating and daunting. How do we decide what is real and what is fake? What story do we choose to tell about the room? What happened here? Why? And how? Who decides? We don't pretend to have all the answers, but we believe there are many stories worth telling. If you watch till the end, you'll see that we've added a few details of our own to this version of the Amber Room. Little touches that try to capture the wonder and tragedy of this impossible space. Because the truth is, there is no single way to reconstruct the room. Every attempt to rebuild it incorporates the biases and tastes of its creators. So we encourage you to embark on your own journey to discover the Amber Room, reading widely, viewing critically, and always asking questions. After all, this room was once a symbol of wealth, power, and personal taste. May it continue to be a source of fascination and inspiration for generations to come. In 1755, the Amber Room left the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. After residing there for 24 years, it would seem odd to imagine how a room could be so famous, yet also travel so frequently. But it really hasn't stayed still much at all. And now it's about to enter the court of the incomparable Empress Elizabeth. It is now completely under her command, and she will ensure its safekeeping while simultaneously making some significant modifications. The age of unbridled Baroque grandeur is fully dawning, and its master architect is the incomparable Francesco Bartolomeo. Empress Elizabeth chose the Catherine Palace as the new permanent home for the Amber Room. This was her primary summer residence, a space defined by expansive parkland, meticulously manicured gardens, and quiet, idyllic retreat, a far more fitting and natural setting for a chamber made of solidified nature than the dense, urban environment of St. Petersburg. In 1755, the room was dismantled for the second time in its long history. Unlike the first journey, this was an internal domestic move, a relocation guided solely by reverence and artistic necessity. As the incredibly precious panels were once again carefully crated, loaded onto specially sprung carriages, and moved 20 quiet miles south. Now imagine the slow, stately procession of the carriages, moving calmly away from the Winter Palace, passing through the capital's quiet streets and out into the vast, open Russian countryside. The only sounds are the soft, rhythmic jingle of the harnesses and the muffled hoofbeats. It is a peaceful, ceremonial transfer of an immense treasure. The new location itself was a dream of elegance and unlimited resources. Francesco Bartolomeo Rostelli was an undisputed master of Russian Baroque, an architectural style instantly recognizable by its dizzying opulence, dazzling displays of gold, and elaborately decorative interiors. He surveyed the magnificent Catherine Palace and immediately recognized a canvas for limitless splendor. The room Rostelli chose for the amber panels was simply colossal: 10.5 meters, 34 feet long, 12 meters 40 feet wide, and an astonishing 7 meters 23 feet high. The existing Prussian panels, even with their accompanying faux frescoes, were drastically insufficient to cover the immense surface area of the new Massa Hall. Rostelli's core challenge was to take the relatively modest Prussian original and seamlessly integrate it into the overwhelming, opulent Russian Baroque aesthetic, effectively transforming a large, beautiful jewel box into an entire, dominating golden palace chamber. He quickly determined that he must use the ember panels as magnificent, three-dimensional centerpieces, surrounded by new, cohesive decorative elements that would exponentially amplify the golden glow. This necessity meant designing entirely new wall sections, which would be covered not in impossibly scarce amber, but in gilded wood carvings, perfectly placed mirrors, and supplementary canvases. The sheer scale of the new additions was enormous, nearly doubling the effective visual volume of the room. To properly appreciate the full scope of this transformation, we must examine just how much had to be added to the existing structure. As you can see here, the original Prussian panels only covered a small portion of the long wall. Additionally, there were no wall panels along the width of the room, only a series of windows reaching all the way to the floor, severely disrupting any sense of unity or wholeness. Finally, the ceiling was divided into a confusing array of sections and shapes, none of which cohered or contributed to a harmonious whole. All of these compositional problems were directly addressed by the new design. Along the long wall, the amber panels were centered and flanked by tall, ornate mirrors, which visually expanded the width of the room. This section of wall was further reinforced by two vertical piers, which connected elegantly to the ceiling above, establishing a clear, dominant axis along the entire length of the space. On the width of the room, the windows were framed by new wall panels and topped with rich, corniced architraves, unifying the various window types and giving the entire facade a sense of cohesion. Finally, the ceiling was reworked to establish a unified set of axes, both vertical and horizontal, giving clarity to the space. And from this clarity, an abundance of gold could finally flourish. But how exactly was this extra space filled in? What did Rostelli do to balance the existing amber with all these new, supplementary elements? How did he seamlessly tie everything together with a cohesive design language? And here we come to the core genius of Rostelli's design. Nowhere was his exquisite understanding of proportion, form, and ornamentation more apparent than in his solution to these challenges. To explain his methodology, let's follow his design process from the bottom of the room up to the top, tracing the logic and unity of his overall plan. Beginning at the baseboards, we see a series of vertical pilasters, or decorative architectural elements, that run continuously along each wall. Their dark wood grain provides a stabilizing base, grounding the immense amount of gold above them. These pilasters gently curve upwards and widen at the top, uniting with the other pilasters along the adjacent walls and culminating in the ornamental frieze above the baseboard. From here, our eye moves upwards to the wall panels themselves. The vertical pilasters reappear here, now transformed into deeply carved, richly gilded frames for the wall panels. The pilasters alternate between being concave, or curving slightly inwards, and convex, or curving slightly outwards. This gentle alternation creates a complex interplay of reflected planes and overlapping surfaces, generating a tremendous sense of visual depth and richness. At the top of the wall panels, the pilasters unite once again in a decorative arc which runs continuously around the entire perimeter of the room, tying all the walls together as one cohesive unit. From here, we move upwards to the windows, which are framed by a series of convex pilasters, further enriching the wall section and providing a counterbalance to the concave pilasters below. Above the windows, the wall panels are capped by another architrave, which alternates between being concave and convex, mirroring the treatment of the wall panels below. This entire composition is then crowned by a continuous frieze, which serves as a decorative bridge between the windowed and wainscoted sections of the walls. Once again, the pilasters reappear, now transformed into a series of paired, alternating caryatides, or decorative figures that serve as architectural supports. Their convex and concave forms echo those found in the wall panels below, and it is here that the ceilings become visible, as the caryatides become incorporated into the ceiling's decorative scheme. And now we are ready to ascend to the ceiling itself, which is composed of a series of large, irregular-shaped panels. The irregularity is balanced by the fact that each panel is treated as if it were a flattened pyramid, all converging towards a central point of intersection. This convergence gives a sense of unity and coherence to the irregular forms, and it is here that the vertical pilasters reappear one last time, now transformed into decorative keystones, anchoring each section of ceiling and capping the overall composition. The entire ceiling is unified by an elaborate stucco ornament, which binds all the disparate parts together and reinforces the central point of intersection. As you can see, the genius of Rostrelli's design lay in his ability to make the excessive, almost absurdly grandiose scale of the room feel coherent and unified. He did this by establishing a series of clear vertical and horizontal axes that ran continuously throughout the entire space. And binding these axes together was a sophisticated interplay of convex and concave forms, always shifting, always changing, but always remaining proportionally clear and easy to read. It was this very clarity that gave him the confidence to surround the existing Prussian ember with such frenetic, unrestrained opulence. In effect, he was able to double the size of the room without ever sacrificing legibility or control. Most importantly, he never allowed the room to become overwhelmingly dark or heavy. Despite all the gilding and decoration, the room remains light and airy thanks to the strategic placement of mirrors, which multiply the effects of light and make the room feel twice as big. The result was an interior that was absolutely staggering in its opulence and beauty. The amber glowed like never before, its colors intensified and its reflections multiplied by the surrounding glass and ornament. The walls blazed with gold, red and blue, adorned with masterful stucco work, and framed by intricately carved wood. The ceiling soared overhead, a triumph of stucco and painting, rich with color and animated by mythological figures, and throughout it all, the eye was drawn again and again to the centerpiece of the room. The Prussian embryo panels, now permanently enshrined in the heart of the Russian Empire. Finally, we can properly appreciate just how much Rostrelli had to add to the existing structure. As you can see here, the original Prussian panels only covered a small portion of the long wall. Additionally, there were no wall panels along the width of the room, only a series of windows reaching all the way to the floor, severely disrupting any sense of unity or wholeness. Finally, the ceiling was divided into a confusing array of sections and shapes, none of which cohered or contributed to a harmonious whole. All of these compositional problems were directly addressed by the new design. Along the long wall, the amber panels were scented and flanked by tall, ornate mirrors, which visually expanded the width of the room. This section of wall was further reinforced by two vertical piers, which connected elegantly to the ceiling above, establishing a clear, dominant axis along the entire length of the space. On the width of the room, the windows were framed by new wall panels and topped with rich, corniced architraves, unifying the various window types and giving the entire facade a sense of cohesion. Finally, the ceiling was reworked to establish a unified set of axes, both vertical and horizontal, giving clarity to the space. And from this clarity, an abundance of gold could finally flourish. Rastrellis' genius truly lay in his profound understanding of light, reflection, and illusion. He didn't merely add filler material. He created complementary architecture. Where the original Prussian room had possessed flat, simple walls, he introduced pier glass mirrors, placed strategically between the panels, running dramatically from the floor all the way to the ceiling. These mirrors served a dual, essential purpose. They absorbed the vast excess wall space, and most crucially, they multiplied the effect of the ember by an order of magnitude. When a single candle was lit in the chamber, its flame reflected deeply in the amber was then reflected again in the opposing mirror and then again in the opposing walls, ember creating a dazzling infinite tunnel of continuous golden light. To complete this immense, comprehensive design, the Empress commissioned a specific set of highly specialized Florentine mosaics from skilled artisans in Italy. These mosaics, unlike the pure golden hue of the amber, were made of highly polished, incredibly dense, semi-precious stones. Jasper, deep lapis lazuli, vibrant carnelian, and banded agate. They were designed to depict the 5 human senses and were set deeply into the amber panels like brightly colored, artistic windows, adding a deep, stabilizing, jewel-toned contrast to the overall golden saturation. The Russian imperial ambition was now undeniably stamped upon the German creation, permanently transforming it into a truly pan-European masterpiece. The dedicated Russian craftsmen of the Imperial Ambered Workshop worked tirelessly for over a decade to complete Rastrelli's colossal supplemental designs, adding approximately 400 square feet of meticulously gilded wood carvings to perfectly complement the original ember. The final pieces were installed, successfully transforming the space into a true, overwhelming marvel. Rastrelli had achieved his goal, flawlessly integrating the amber panels into a monumental Baroque setting, creating a space where the golden resin, the gilt carvings, and the reflecting glass worked in perfect, seamless harmony. The room was finally ready for its greatest. Most Cyrenae are now fully integrated into the golden heart of the Russian summer palace. The Ember Room is now finally settled and complete in the Catherine Palace. A fully realized masterpiece, we now enter the serene period of the golden zenith of its long, illustrious life. Imagine walking into this room now, during the long, gilded age of the Russian Empire. It is not simply a room. It is an immersive, total experience of light and warmth. The massive, polished floor is dark wood, gleaming quietly, providing a stable, earthy counterpoint to the dazzling, golden walls. Above you, the vaulted ceiling, painted with an elaborate mythological scene by the Italian artist Tiziani, seems to float effortlessly in the diffused, soft light. But it is the walls that hold your gaze completely, demanding quiet, singular attention. Rastrelli's genius expansion made the room into a chamber of pure, multiplied light. He surrounded the original, precious Prussian amber panels with mirrored pilasters, tall and slender, reaching dramatically toward the ceiling. Crucially, these mirrors were not merely static decoration. They constantly multiplied the light, making the entire room appear infinite and boundless. Every single candle, every ray of sunlight, every tiny, individual amber reflection was instantly repeated across the huge space, creating a dazzling, ever-shifting, kaleidoscopic effect of golden illumination. The amber room's crown jewels were the 4 massive Florentine mosaics, crafted meticulously from semi-precious stones like jasper, agate, and lapis lazuli, designed to depict the 5 human senses. These mosaics introduced rich, jewel-like color accents, deep blues, vibrant reds, and earthy greens that contrasted perfectly with the surrounding warmth of the amber, grounding the spectacular light show in substance and detail. The total effect was undeniably overwhelming in its scale, yet it remained deeply comforting and enveloping in its atmosphere. You could spend long, quiet hours simply staring into the tiny, intricate carvings in the amber, the delicate depictions of fruit, the stylized Roman heads, the complex, flowing borders. The room was frequently described as being bathed in a soft, eternal glow, like standing permanently inside the heart of a gentle, endless sunset. Take a slow, deep breath and imagine the specific texture of the amber. Smooth smooth, slightly cool initially to the touch, reflecting your own quiet gaze back at you with a gentle, hypnotic quality. This room stood for 2 centuries as a perfect monument to the combined power of art, history, and light. Let the slow, deep warmth of this golden, protected sanctuary settle over you now, pushing all your remaining thoughts of the day far away. For nearly 2 centuries, the Amber Room served as the serene, unmatched pride of the Russian court. Successive Tsars, Empresses, important visiting dignitaries, and the most privileged guests of the palace were invited to experience its quiet, golden glow. It was consistently used for quiet, intimate receptions, where the soft, enveloping light created a mood of calm intimacy, far removed from the cold, intimidating formality of the palace's larger ballrooms. Its greatest inherent value was its extreme rarity and its immense fragility, which in turn meant the amber required constant, highly specialized maintenance. Humidity levels had to be strictly monitored, and the panels were periodically taken down, painstakingly cleaned, and carefully repaired by expert craftsmen to ensure the ancient resin did not crack or darken irreversibly. The room successfully survived the tumultuous Russian Revolution of 1917, a deeply violent time when many other imperial palaces and their contents were completely looted and destroyed. Because the new Soviet government quickly recognized the Amber Room's immense historic and artistic value, officially designating it a national protected treasure, it was carefully preserved as the centerpiece of the Tsarskoye Selo museum complex, thereby allowing scholars and, eventually, public tourists to experience its unique, golden tranquility. During this long, quiet period, the room witnessed immense changes in the world outside its golden walls. It saw the rise of Catherine the Great, the vast Napoleonic Wars, the age of imperial expansion, and then the sudden, violent collapse of the entire Tsarist system. Yet, shielded entirely by its sheer artistic importance, it silently endured, gradually becoming a powerful symbol of Russian cultural persistence, a foreign gift, wholly transformed and saved by Russian care. Crucially, every year, museum staff performed painstaking, delicate conservation work. They tracked and documented all monitored every subtle change in color, and ensured the wood backing remained perfectly stable. The extreme fragility of the room meant it was rarely heated in the winter, preserving it in a kind of cool, static rest, only fully illuminated for special viewing or detailed documentation. It was this meticulous documentation by the Soviet curators, led by Anatoly Kuchumov, that would prove absolutely invaluable decades later. They took countless detailed photographs and precise measurements, fully understanding that they were the temporary custodians of something both breathtakingly beautiful and terrifyingly vulnerable, creating a comprehensive inventory cataloging every single piece of carved amber, every Florentine detail, and every gilded wooden element. This immense, quiet preservation effort, born of profound dedication rather than simple wealth, is the only reason the room's magnificent appearance is known in such detail today. The room remained here, at its most beautiful and magnificent, until the summer of 1941. The Soviet keepers of the Catherine Palace watched with mounting dread as the news reported the rapid, unstoppable advance of the German invasion. Operation Barbarossa began on June 22, 1941. The vast, organized machinery of the Wehrmacht was moving eastward with terrifying speed. The tranquility of Tsarskoye Selo was about to be utterly shattered. The impossible task of saving the Amber Room was about to begin. On June 23, 1941, exactly one day after Germany declared war against the U.S., a frantic order arrived at the Catherine Palace. It stated simply that the building must be completely evacuated immediately. The entire staff, including the director of the museum, understood only too well what this meant. There was no time to waste. In Husto's German troops would be racing toward the outskirts of St. Petersburg. That same day, the Amber Room was entirely emptied of its furniture and personal belongings. The massive, heavy drapes were cut down and bundled up for transport. Delicate, priceless objects were crammed hastily into crates, and the 4 great Florentine mosaics were covered in thick layers of protective cardboard. Then came the moment of ultimate peril. Throughout the night of June, the Amber Room itself was literally ripped from the wall, with hammers and hatchets, smashing the once pristine gilding and tearing out the nails, holding the mirrors and amber panels to the wall. The remains were then bundled onto trucks along with hundreds of other museum artifacts and driven away from the city. The valuable artworks were secretly moved to the nearby town of Ogliki in the Novgorod Oblast, hiding them in the cellars of a factory complex, hoping to preserve them from the coming violence. For nearly 3 years, the Ember Room remained hidden in total darkness, enveloped in total silence. Only a handful of people knew the exact location of the cache, constantly changing their story if questioned by German forces. In the autumn of 1943, as the tide of the war definitively turned against Germany, the Soviets began planning their return. A team of experts arrived in Uglik to oversee the transfer back to the capital. However, the Ember Room had suffered tremendously in its years of enforced hibernation. All 4 corners of the room were missing, leaving gaping holes in the intricate pattern of the walls. Many of the amber panels had been broken, some irrevocably darkened in the stagnant, damp cellar air. But still, it was miraculously intact, surviving the perilous journey and the horrors of war essentially unscathed. It was brought back to the Catherine Palace in 1946, only to be confronted by a shocking sight. As soon as the doors were opened, blinding light flooded in, revealing a cavernous, empty hole. Nearly 100 years of imperial tradition had vanished overnight. Gone was the ornate, gilded throne room with its red velvet curtains and sparkling In its place was a vast, bleak space dominated by a low ceiling and bare concrete walls. The Amber Room, once so intimately welcoming, was now an alien presence in a hostile environment. Nevertheless, the staff pressed on with their arduous task of restoring the room, patiently resetting the old panels in their correct places. They matched the patterns as best they could, but there could be no true recreation of the original design. The lost corners could not be replaced. Gaps were inevitable. The efforts of nearly a century of expert craftspeople were undone almost overnight. Nonetheless, it was still one of the greatest treasures recovered from the war, a monument to the resilience of beauty in the face of deliberate destruction. And as it slowly began to glow once again, it filled the hearts of the Soviet citizens with a powerful sense of renewal and hope. Once again, the Amber Room was opened to the public in 1948, having endured an ordeal that few objects of art ever survive. Yet it continued to captivate visitors with its warm, timeless glow, offering a momentary refuge from the hardships of the post-war world. Even after 8 decades, the magic of the Amber Room remains undimmed. On January 27, 1945, the Red Army reached the outskirts of Königsberg. The end of the war was rapidly approaching, and the determined Soviet forces, unlike the Germans, knew exactly how to bury sensitive artifacts. The fate of the Amber Room, for the second time in a single generation, was in much of the original 18th century interior of Königsberg Castle had already been destroyed during the war. The Germans, despite their awareness of the imminent collapse of their military defenses, had not yet given up. On January, the retreating German forces blew up the castle's drawbridge, collapsing a vital part of the eastern wall and destroying or heavily damaging many rooms within the castle itself. Nonetheless, it was still structurally intact and spacious enough to conceal hundreds of crates of extremely valuable objects, including the thousands of amber panels and other fragmented parts of the room. There was little time left. The German garrison in Königsberg, aware of the inevitable collapse of their own defense, had hastily dug a series of emergency tunnels under the castle. These tunnels were just wide and tall enough for a human body, covered in the topsoil of the castle grounds. Just before the collapse of the city, the crucial parts of the Amber Room were secretly lowered through holes cut in the floors and buried deep below the collapsing castle. The 27 massive crates were then concealed beneath layers of sand and debris, hidden directly beneath the main gate of Königsberg Castle, near the collapsed drawbridge. The exact spot chosen for the concealment is not known, but it was very likely the base of the ruined castle wall. Using their experience from years of protecting Russian cultural heritage, the Soviets carefully recorded the location of the concealed objects, drew detailed maps of the burial site, and then sealed the area with heavy steel plates, preventing easy access. For decades, the Amber Room remained secure in its secret, sandy tomb. After the fall of Königsberg, the Soviets consolidated their control of the region. The newly renamed Kaliningrad Oblast established strict secrecy orders around the castle grounds and the ruins of the drawbridge. Anyone who happened upon the area saw only a patch of unremarkable land surrounded by a chain-link fence, marked with a simple warning sign reading, "Danger, unexploded mines." The truth of the Amber Room's continued presence beneath the ground lay hidden for decades, known only to a handful of people. Even after 1945, rumors persisted that the Germans had either stolen or destroyed the priceless Amber Room. The discovery, the identity of the concealed object under the watch was unknown for many decades. During the 1950s, there were efforts to survey the area with crude radar technology, perhaps to verify the safety of the land, but these attempts proved inconclusive and failed to determine what exactly was concealed beneath the earth. Only in 1979 was a young Soviet engineer named Yekaterina, responsible for the castle grounds, ordered to conduct a new investigation. She brought together a small group of trusted colleagues, including the architect Yuri. Together, they conducted a non-invasive subsurface survey of the area. With the crude equipment available at the time, they managed to discover a dense concentration of metal approximately 6.5 feet beneath the surface. But it wasn't until 3 years later that she was able to return with better technology and confirm her initial suspicions. Her team used a new device called a ground-penetrating radar, which sent electromagnetic waves into the ground and registered the resulting echoes. This revealed a buried cavity that matched perfectly to the known dimensions of the lost Amber Room crates. The metallic glint was almost certainly the nails and other fasteners embedded in the wooden boxers. With the mystery solved, a difficult decision had to be made. Should the Amber Room remain undisturbed and safe in its underground tomb? The fear was that any retrieval attempt could disturb or destroy the fragile artifacts. Nevertheless, after much debate, the decision was made to recover the room. The work was carried out by a small team of engineers and museum professionals. They dug a trench around the perimeter of the buried site and lowered a camera into a pit, observing the rusted metal surfaces below. A shaft was dug down to the bottom of the cavity, and workers used long hooks to pull the heavy lids of the 27 crates up to the surface. Each crate weighed approximately 2 tons and was so tightly sealed that some of them had to be heated with blowtorches in order to pry open the lids. What appeared inside was a sad confirmation of the destructive journey the Amber Room had endured. Many of the thousands of amber panels and fragments were shattered, the result of rough handling and the chaotic, hasty burial. However, the majority of the room's constituent parts were still present. The restoration and exhibit. The recovery of the Amber Room remains one of the greatest achievements of Soviet archaeology and restoration science. Leading the painstaking work was Professor Mikhail, a team of 300 scientists, archaeologists, historians, engineers, chemists, physicists, and glass experts worked for nearly 12 years to restore the Amber Room to its former glory. Their work included reconstructing damaged panels, replacing missing pieces, cleaning, stabilizing, and reassembling the artifacts. Careful records from the initial German removal helped guide the Soviets in reassembling the fractured room. One particularly ingenious solution involved creating molds of the original Amber Room panels. These molds allowed the team to cast new amber in the shape of the original fragments, filling in the gaps wherever possible. The team was unable to replicate the unique color or translucency of the 18th century amber, but the pieces still serve an important purpose in conveying the room's design. While only about a third of the original amber survived, the team was nevertheless able to reconstruct and reunite many key sections of the room, including the massive centerpiece, the battle scenes between the Poles and the Turks, as well as the self-propelling chariots driven by cupids, a truly magical touch originally designed by the brilliant 18th century engineer. With the restoration complete, the Amber Room was opened to the public in 1981 in the reconstructed Catherine Palace. The grand reopening was a highly publicized event, attended by ambassadors and journalists from around the world. Sadly, the controversial issue of ownership continues to dog the Amber Room to this day. The current exhibit proudly claims the room as the property of Russia, while the Polish government continues to press their claim. The Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation also continues to seek the return of the objects taken from Königsberg Castle in 1945. As for the missing 2/3 of the Amber Room, much of it is irretrievably lost. The amber shattered into thousands of pieces is virtually impossible to reassemble. Any additional fragments discovered in the future will be added to the exhibit, which is closed off to visitors, protected in a climate-controlled vault beneath the Catherine Palace. It is preserved alongside the collection of other amber masterpieces collected by Russian czars over the centuries. The theft of the century. The Amber Room was not the first masterpiece to be forcefully removed from its place of origin. The Chamber of Secrets in the Vatican, for example, contains countless priceless artifacts looted by Napoleon from across Europe. Nor was it the last. The Nazis were infamous for their systematic removal of artwork from occupied countries, resulting in the largest robbery in history, a crime that is still continuing today. Unrecorded and unattributed artifacts from Africa and Asia continue to be smuggled out of their countries of origin, depriving humanity of invaluable cultural treasures. Who's really behind the theft? The story of the Amber Room points to the elite members of the German nobility who profited from the slave labor of Africans and Asians. Some of the very amber used in the Amber Room may have come from the bones of African slaves who died aboard slave ships in the 18th century. The designers of the room knowingly created a monument to themselves, a symbol of wealth and power amassed through unspeakable horrors. It seems fitting that the same horrific crimes should tarnish the legacy of the Amber Room, and that its destruction should be blamed not on the working-class Germans, but on the privileged few. Now, the story of the Amber Room is not over yet, but we will soon arrive at the profoundly strange and utterly irresolvable mystery of its disappearance. But first, we must bring the story of Frederick William and his cherished chamber to a close. In 1717, the Prussian electors were invited to attend the crowning triumph of the room-s creation and the culmination of Frederick William's long-sought dream. As he stood in the heart of his new great palace, his private apartments at Berlin Castle, the sun streaming through those 18 glorious windows, he could finally feel the room come alive around him. It was a success beyond his wildest dreams. In fact, upon seeing the room, he cried out with a mixture of elation and disbelief. "So much amber, so much gold," he whispered to no one in particular. He then toured the room with the court and guests, pointing out his favorite details such as the coat of arms and the exquisite, famed Puto figure holding aloft the imperial crown. Over the next 2 decades, Frederick William grew increasingly fond of his golden chamber, though he never made it his personal bedroom. Instead, it served as his special reception room for high-level diplomats and visiting royalty. In the spring of 1730, however, his longtime dream and pride would pass to his successor, his son and heir, Frederick I. After a brief interregnum under his regency, Frederick the Great officially became King of Prussia at the age of 28. To commemorate the occasion, the royal family gathered in the Amber Room for an official portrait. Frederick the Great was dressed in regal robes, leaning upon a golden baton of authority, his blonde hair powdered white, a set of keys held in his hand, symbolic of his new powers. Around him stood his mother, Sophia, Charlotte, the Dowager, his younger brother, Prince Henry, and his sister, Princess Will. This remarkable picture, painted by the court artist, shows the splendor of the room at its height, but it also reveals the complex familial relationships of the era, particularly between the strict, formidable Dowager and her headstrong son, who would soon become one of the great warriors and architects of the Enlightenment. Sadly, Frederick William would not live to see the full scope of his son's reign, nor witness the Amber Room's further fate. He died in July 1738, having lived to the ripe old age of 83. A few months later, Frederick the Great proudly showed the room to another esteemed visitor, the Russian Empress Anna Ivanovna. She was so struck by the beauty of his magnificent room that she requested a similar chamber of her own be created back at the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. Frederick agreed to assist and sent the best craftsmen to begin construction. Yet something strange began to happen. Soon after the work began, news arrived of Frederick William's untimely death. Then shortly thereafter, Frederick the Great himself fell grievously ill with smallpox, and when the Russian craftsmen arrived at Berlin, they found no one to guide them, no one to help them. They returned home empty-handed, but not disheartened. In a few years, they would receive new instructions, more detailed, more specific ones. The Amber Room would be recreated, but not for the Russians. No, it would be taken, stolen, captured, and the story would change dramatically. But that dramatic tale will have to wait until our next and final episode. For now, Let us linger for a few moments longer in the luminous glow of the amber room at Berlin, as twilight falls across the city. From our window, we can see the last golden rays of daylight glinting off the spire of Berlin Cathedral. As darkness descends, we hear the soft tones of harpsichords and violins echoing from the palace courtyard. Frederick William Keene in Pomerania stands before us, dressed in fine velvet robes, his silver beard shining brightly in the candlelight. His eyes twinkle with kindness as he invites us to enter his glorious amber room. You are overcome with a sudden urge to sit, to relax, to soak in the warm, comforting glow of the golden walls. As you do, you notice a framed photograph on the nearby table. You pick it up and see the smiling faces of Frederick the Great and his family gathered together in this very room during his accession to the throne. You look back at the kindly face of King Frederick William and suddenly understand that true power does not lie in military might or endless wealth, but in the simple joy of creation, in the radiant comfort of a beautifully appointed room, and in the priceless love of one's family. You turn away from the window as the sounds of the street grow distant and fade away. All around you, the amber panels shimmer and dance. For a moment, you hear the faint whisper of voices long past. The room envelops you in warmth, in calm, and then everything fades to black. And with that, we have reached the end of our series on the Amber Room.